Alexander Bennett had everything: wealth, power, success, but felt completely empty, haunted by loneliness. Emma Carter, broken by betrayal and hardship, had lost all hope, until their worlds collided unexpectedly. Their shocking arrangement ignited secrets, fierce betrayal, heartbreak, and an explosive journey toward redemption. Can love truly overcome painful pasts and deep scars? Witness Alexander and Emma's powerful story unfold, a gripping tale of passion, resilience, and second chances that will leave your heart racing and emotions stirred. Where are you tuning in from? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to experience more unforgettable stories like this one. Alexander Bennett stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his luxurious penthouse, staring blankly into the glittering city below. At 40, Alex had everything most men could only dream of: a sprawling business empire, lavish homes, expensive cars, and more money than he could spend in a lifetime. Yet, despite all this, happiness seemed forever out of reach. The city lights reflected sharply in his dark eyes, but they brought him no warmth, no comfort, only an aching reminder of how lonely his life had become. Twice he had tried marriage, and twice he had failed spectacularly. Each heartbreak carved deeper into him, building walls he was convinced would never fall. His first wife had been beautiful, intelligent, and captivating, but their passion had quickly fizzled into bitter arguments, fueled by mutual misunderstandings. The second marriage had started as a strategic move, one that promised stability rather than love. But even that had crumbled under the weight of indifference and silent resentment. After the ink dried on his second divorce, Alex had decided he would never allow himself to be vulnerable again. He had thrown himself entirely into his work, turning cold ambition into armor that no one could penetrate. Yet tonight, in the silent luxury of his home, that armor felt unbearably heavy. Alex moved away from the window, his expensive shoes echoing softly against polished marble floors. His gaze wandered to a framed photo on the grand piano. His late father, stern and proud, the man who had taught him that emotions were weakness, love was conditional, and success was everything. Growing up under such unyielding expectations had shaped Alex into a powerful but distant man. The elder Bennett's obsession with legacy and control left no room for tenderness, teaching Alex to measure his worth only in power and wealth. But standing alone in the shadow of his father's cold legacy, Alex now understood the emptiness behind those lessons. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid reflecting the dim lighting of the room. Taking a slow sip, he felt a pang of longing deep within, a longing that had nothing to do with money or power. It was the quiet, persistent whisper in the back of his mind, asking him what would remain after he was gone. Who would inherit the Bennett name? Who would carry forward everything he had built? Alex's hands tightened around the glass, frustration seeping through his carefully controlled exterior. There was no wife at his side, no child to teach or mentor, only empty rooms and endless silence. He had spent his life chasing the very success that now mocked him with its hollowness. He needed an heir, someone who could continue the Bennett name and the empire that had consumed his entire existence. It was no longer a question of love or companionship. It was a cold calculation, something he knew how to handle, like one of his many business deals. Emotions could be messy, unpredictable, but business was rational, clean, efficient. Walking slowly toward the plush leather couch, Alex sank down, leaning his head back in quiet contemplation. He could adopt, of course, but the thought left him uneasy. He needed someone of his blood, someone whose very existence validated his struggles and sacrifices. A child who could inherit his intelligence, his determination, perhaps even his stubborn pride. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. He didn't need another wife or romantic entanglement. All he required was someone to carry his child, someone he could compensate generously and who would willingly walk away once their role was fulfilled. It was a ruthless arrangement, devoid of sentimentality, yet it seemed like the only logical solution. Alex drained the glass and set it down firmly, decision settling like cold certainty within him. He would not be swayed by sentiment. This was about securing his legacy, nothing more. He rose to his feet, feeling strangely relieved. This was a problem he could solve with money, clarity, and control. 3 things he understood intimately. Yet, as he passed the piano again, something stopped him. The photo of his father seemed colder, more judgmental than ever. Alex hesitated, a flicker of doubt breaking through his rigid determination. Was he becoming exactly like the man who had robbed him of warmth and genuine happiness? For a brief moment, his heart stirred painfully, reminding him of a loneliness he'd buried beneath layers of success. But just as quickly, he brushed the thought aside, refocusing on the plan he had devised. He would find someone suitable, finalize the details swiftly, and secure an heir. No emotional entanglements, no heartbreak. Just a clean, efficient arrangement. Satisfied, Alex turned away from the piano, stepping back toward the window and looking down at the glittering, indifferent city. He was about to change his life forever, but even he had no idea how deeply that decision would shatter everything he thought he knew. Emma Carter sat huddled on the cold sidewalk, surrounded by the ceaseless bustle of city life that passed her by unnoticed. At 28, Emma had experienced enough hardship for several lifetimes. The once vibrant dreams she'd nurtured now lay buried beneath layers of struggle, heartbreak, and survival. A worn sketchbook rested on her lap, her slender fingers gripping a pencil as it traced swift, delicate lines over the faded paper. Her dark hair fell in loose waves, framing a face that held quiet dignity despite the harshness etched into her expression. Emma had once been a promising student at a prestigious art school, her professors praising her natural talent and creativity. She had dreamed of galleries filled with her paintings, vibrant canvases bringing stories to life and connecting deeply with people's hearts. Her mother, her greatest supporter, had believed fiercely in her talent, encouraging her to pursue her passion against all odds. But life had a cruel way of unraveling dreams. After her mother's sudden death, her father, unable or unwilling to cope, left her, abandoning her without explanation or apology. Alone with no support or money, Emma's fragile world collapsed in slow, painful waves. Without family or stability, she soon fell behind on tuition, missing classes until the art school finally expelled her. With nowhere to go, Emma found herself drifting into homelessness, the cold streets becoming both prison and refuge. Yet, despite the harshness of her daily existence, scrounging for scraps of food, fighting off bitter cold, and enduring the indifferent gazes of passers-by, Emma clung desperately to her art. Each sketch was a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting her to the person she once was, the person she still yearned to be. Tonight, as the city lights danced across the damp pavement, Emma sketched quickly, lost in the graceful movements of her pencil. Her drawings weren't just expressions of creativity. They were a silent scream, an outlet for pain and loneliness she couldn't otherwise release. As people hurried past her, rushing toward their warm homes, they barely spared her a glance. But Emma didn't seek pity or charity. She only craved the solace of her art, the brief escape it offered from her reality. She lifted her gaze briefly, eyes tracing the hurried crowd with quiet resignation. She wondered if anyone realized she existed. Not as a shadow on the street corner, but as a human being with dreams, fears, and desires. Her stomach twisted painfully with hunger, but she ignored it, pushing the discomfort to the back of her mind. There were worse things than physical hunger, such as the emptiness of feeling utterly invisible. Returning her attention to the sketchbook, Emma's pencil moved gently, shaping the haunting image of a woman with tears streaming down her face. Without realizing it, she'd drawn her own reflection, capturing the sorrow she tried daily to bury beneath stoic strength. The streetlights blurred her vision for a moment, her own tears threatening to escape. Quickly, she brushed them aside, determined not to surrender to weakness. From the corner of her eye, Emma noticed a sleek black car slowing at the intersection nearby. She paid it no mind, accustomed to being overlooked or, worse, regarded with disdain. Yet something about the car felt different. A strange feeling prickled at the edge of her consciousness, but she dismissed it, refocusing on the sketch. The sound of engines revving and car horns filled the night air again as traffic moved on, and Emma felt oddly relieved, though she didn't understand why. Her pencil began shading darker lines now, deepening the shadows around the figure's sorrowful eyes. Every stroke seemed to release a piece of the pain she held so tightly within her chest. Emma never drew for money or recognition. She drew to survive, to keep her spirit alive, amid overwhelming despair. Yet, tonight, beneath the cool glow of city lights, something stirred within Emma, an unsettling sense that change was approaching, quiet and unstoppable. She shivered slightly, not from the cold, but from a strange anticipation that wrapped itself around her heart, both thrilling and terrifying in its uncertainty. Closing her sketchbook slowly, Emma gazed upward at the towering buildings above her, the windows glowing warmly with lives she would never touch, dreams she would never share. A quiet sigh escaped her lips as she hugged the worn book tightly against her chest, clinging to the last fragments of hope hidden within its pages. Unbeknownst to her, fate had already begun weaving its intricate web. And very soon, Emma's solitary existence would collide dramatically with someone whose life was as different from hers as day from night, changing everything she knew and believed in forever. The busy streets hummed with life as Alexander navigated his sleek black car through the evening traffic. He was restless, the intensity of his decision pressing heavily against his chest. His fingers tapped lightly on the leather steering wheel, a nervous habit he'd never quite shaken. He had always approached life's challenges as calculated deals, devoid of sentimentality. Yet tonight, as he stared blankly at the city moving past, he felt a lingering unease, an intangible whisper of doubt that refused to fade. At a stoplight near the city's bustling center, his eyes were drawn suddenly to the sidewalk. Sitting alone beneath a street lamp, a young woman was hunched over, absorbed in something she was holding. Her appearance was strikingly out of place among the busy rush around her. Messy dark hair fell loosely around a delicate face, her worn clothing emphasizing her fragile vulnerability. Alexander felt his curiosity stir, wondering why someone so clearly troubled seemed utterly oblivious to the chaos surrounding her. As he continued to watch, he noticed the swift, confident movements of her hand, the careful intensity of her focus. She wasn't begging, wasn't pleading for attention. Instead, she was sketching something, completely lost in her own world. Something about her quiet determination captivated him. It was rare for anything to hold his attention for more than a fleeting moment. Yet here he was, inexplicably mesmerized by the mysterious figure beneath the street lamp. Behind him, a car horn blared impatiently, snapping Alexander from his contemplation. Shaking off his curiosity, he accelerated through the intersection, but as he drove farther away, her image stayed stubbornly etched into his mind. He could not shake the strange feeling of connection to someone he didn't even know. He argued silently with himself, labeling the fascination ridiculous and uncharacteristic. Yet, a few blocks away, impulse overwhelmed reason, and he found himself turning his car sharply around, heading back toward the young woman. She was still there, oblivious to the world, shading carefully now as he parked at the curb and rolled down his tinted window. "Hey," he called out, his voice calm yet firm, the familiar, authoritative tone he used in boardrooms. The woman glanced upward sharply, her deep, expressive eyes narrowing cautiously. "What do you want?" she asked, suspicion clear in her voice. "Come here," he urged, gently commanding but without aggression. "I want to speak with you." Emma hesitated, her fingers gripping her pencil tightly, wary of strangers approaching her late at night. She studied Alexander carefully, noting his expensive suit, the powerful luxury car. His authoritative presence unsettled her, yet there was something oddly genuine in his steady gaze. "Why?" she questioned, her voice stronger now, a defensive edge sharpening each word. "Just talk," Alexander replied evenly. "I promise I'm not here to cause trouble." Emma considered him a moment longer, torn between caution and curiosity. Finally, deciding she had little to lose, she rose slowly, walked cautiously to his car, and met his gaze with guarded intensity. "What exactly do you want?" she asked again, her voice tinged with suspicion. Alexander hesitated, suddenly unsure how to phrase the unconventional proposal he'd mentally rehearsed. Choosing his words carefully, he said simply, "Get in. Let me take you somewhere safe and warm, and I'll explain." Emma laughed bitterly, shaking her head. Alexander's expression softened slightly, sensing her distrust. He understood why she was wary, but something deep inside urged him forward. "I'm offering something that could completely change your life," he said firmly, sincerity clear in his tone. "But not here. Get in the car, and you'll understand." Emma stood frozen, debating. The streetlights illuminated her delicate features, highlighting exhaustion beneath her defensive posture. Finally, with weary resignation, she sighed and slipped into the passenger seat, tension evident in her rigid posture. As he drove toward a quiet cafe, silence hung heavily between them. Alexander broke it first, his voice carefully neutral. "What's your name?" "Emma," she whispered cautiously, her guard still raised. "Emma Carter." "Alexander Bennett," he replied simply, feeling oddly compelled to reassure her. "I won't hurt you, Emma." Emma remained silent, fidgeting nervously, uncertainty clouding her features. Moments later, sitting in the corner of the softly lit cafe, Alexander leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. "I need someone to carry my child," he began bluntly, "and I'm prepared to pay you generously, enough to start a new life." Emma's eyes widened in shock, disbelief stealing her breath away. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice trembling. Alexander met her gaze steadily, unfazed by her reaction. "I assure you, Emma, I'm entirely serious. This could transform your life." Emma sat speechless, heart racing, struggling to process the surreal proposition placed before her by the mysterious, powerful stranger who had stepped unexpectedly into her world, shaking her fragile existence to its very core. Emma sat frozen in her seat, her heart pounding as Alexander's stark proposal echoed in her mind. Her eyes searched his face desperately, seeking any sign of insincerity, any hint of deception, but his expression remained calm, determined, and unwaveringly honest. She felt disoriented, caught between disbelief and the terrifying realization that this might be her only escape from the endless misery she'd known for so long. "Why me?" she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of conversations in the cafe around them. Alexander studied her carefully, his dark eyes softening slightly. "Because when I saw you on the street, I saw someone who had survived, someone strong enough to handle this. I don't need love or attachment, just someone resilient enough to follow through." Emma laughed bitterly, shaking her head slowly. "You don't even know me. How can you say something like that?" I trust my instincts, Alexander replied firmly. And my instincts are rarely wrong. She stared down at her trembling hands, tightly gripping the edge of the table. Her mind spun wildly, battling between moral outrage and pragmatic desperation. The idea felt impossible, absurd, even immoral. Yet the harsh reality of her life had taught her long ago that morality was a luxury she couldn't afford. "What exactly would I have to do?" Emma finally asked, her voice hesitant, barely masking the anxiety rippling beneath the surface. "You'd carry my child," Alexander said bluntly, leaning back slightly, his gaze unflinching. "I'll provide a comfortable home, medical care, and financial security throughout your pregnancy. Afterward, you'll receive enough money to start fresh. Where you choose." Emma looked away, her heart aching with uncertainty. The idea of bringing a child into the world solely for financial benefit felt deeply unsettling. Yet the alternative, the painful, soul-crushing hopelessness she had known for so long, seemed equally unbearable. "Why not just adopt?" she asked suddenly, her tone sharper, more defiant than she intended. "Why put someone through this?" Alexander's jaw tightened slightly, revealing a flicker of buried emotion. "Because I want a child of my own blood. Adoption involves complications I'm unwilling to face." Emma studied his face, reading the faint lines of tension around his eyes, sensing something deeper beneath his seemingly cold exterior. Despite the harshness of his words, she sensed an underlying sadness in his rigid control. "What happens after the baby is born?" Emma pressed further, her voice trembling slightly. "Will you try to take the child from me? Will you make me disappear?" Alexander met her eyes steadily. "You'll be protected by a legally binding contract. Once the child is born, you'll have the money promised, and you'll be free to live your life as you wish. There will be no strings attached. No strings attached, no obligations beyond the initial agreement." Emma's breath caught painfully in her throat, her heart racing. She wanted desperately to refuse, to reject the outrageous proposal and flee back into the anonymity of the city streets. But deep within, she recognized a cruel truth. The life waiting for her, if she walked away, was even darker than this uncertain offer. "I need time," she murmured finally, voice trembling. "This is too sudden. I can't just decide something like this right now." Alexander nodded calmly, clearly expecting her hesitation. "You have 24 hours. After that, I'll find someone else." Emma stood shakily, legs weak beneath her, as reality began to set in. "Thank you," she whispered awkwardly, unsure of what else to say. "Think carefully," Alexander warned gently, his voice serious but not unkind. "Opportunities like this don't come twice." As Emma walked out into the cool night air, uncertainty churned violently in her chest. She wandered aimlessly through dimly lit streets, Alexander's proposal echoing relentlessly through her mind. This was not how she had imagined her life would unfold. Not the beautiful dreams she'd nurtured as a hopeful art student, nor the simple desire to find peace. Yet desperation whispered harsh truths, reminding her of cold nights spent hungry and alone, the hollow ache of abandonment, and the unbearable feeling of worthlessness. Hours passed as she sat alone in the darkness of a deserted park, eyes tracing patterns in the sky, her thoughts racing. Gradually, beneath the fear and doubt, a quiet voice emerged, whispering softly of possibility, of a fresh start, of freedom from the pain she'd endured for far too long. By sunrise, Emma knew her choice was made. As terrifying as the path ahead seemed, returning to her previous life was simply unimaginable. With determination born from desperation and a fragile hope for a brighter future, she took a deep breath and began walking back toward the cafe, back toward Alexander Bennett, and toward a decision that would forever alter the course of her life. Emma's arrival at Alexander's sprawling estate felt surreal, as though she had stepped from one world into another entirely different. The mansion stood majestically amid perfectly manicured gardens, its tall windows gleaming softly beneath the midday sun. As she stepped from the car, Emma hesitated, struck by the overwhelming beauty and intimidating grandeur of her new surroundings. Alexander moved ahead, quietly authoritative, leading her toward the enormous front doors. Inside, marble floors stretched endlessly. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering reflections, and the expansive hallways echoed her soft footsteps. Emma felt painfully out of place, aware of every tear and stain on her worn clothing. Yet Alexander, seemingly oblivious to her discomfort, guided her silently through the magnificent home, finally stopping at a spacious, elegant bedroom. Sunlight streamed warmly through large windows overlooking lush gardens, bathing the room in comforting brightness. "This is your room," Alexander said, his voice polite but detached. "You'll have everything you need here. My assistant, Mr. Harris, will arrive shortly with the contract. Read it carefully." Emma nodded slowly, her heart pounding with unease and lingering disbelief. Alexander paused briefly, studying her quietly, his dark eyes betraying none of his thoughts. "If there's anything else you require, inform Mr. Harris." As Alexander left, closing the door quietly behind him, Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the sudden solitude and surreal luxury. She glanced around, fingers grazing the soft sheets, marveling at the sheer comfort, something she'd long forgotten existed. But alongside relief and comfort came a deep, unsettling anxiety. What had she truly agreed to? Would she regret this decision? Days passed slowly as Emma adjusted cautiously to her new life. Alexander remained polite yet distant, his interactions limited to brief, formal exchanges. Staff members treated her courteously but kept their distance, seemingly uncertain of her place in the household. Despite the physical comfort and abundant luxury, Emma felt isolated, trapped within a gilded cage where she clearly didn't belong. One afternoon, while wandering restlessly through the mansion, Emma stumbled upon a room she hadn't seen before. Curious, she stepped inside and stopped abruptly, eyes widening in astonishment. The room had been transformed into a beautiful art studio, complete with canvases, paints, pencils, and a sturdy wooden easel bathed in warm, natural light. Her heart clenched painfully as she moved forward, lightly brushing fingers over the paints and brushes, the longing inside her igniting into something both joyful and deeply emotional. On a small wooden table rested a folded note bearing Alexander's neat handwriting. "I recall you mentioning your love for drawing. Perhaps this might offer some comfort." Emma's breath caught in her throat as she reread the words, unexpectedly touched by this quiet gesture. For a man who seemed so distant, this small, thoughtful action revealed a surprising depth. Emotion tightened her chest as she picked up a pencil, fingers trembling slightly with gratitude and renewed hope. That evening, Alexander surprised Emma further by joining her for dinner in the grand dining room. Candles flickered softly, casting shadows over the elegant table set with exquisite china and delicate crystal. Silence lingered awkwardly between them, heavy and uncertain, until Alexander cleared his throat, eyes studying her carefully. "You've been quiet," he remarked gently. "I hope you're settling in comfortably." Emma hesitated, meeting his gaze cautiously. "Everything is beautiful," she said softly, honesty coloring her voice. "But it still feels overwhelming." Alexander nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I suppose it would. You've experienced a great deal, Emma. Your strength is admirable. Surprised by his unexpected kindness, Emma felt her guard slip slightly. Life hasn't exactly been easy, she admitted quietly. Eyes fixed on her plate. Eyes fixed on her plate. But hardship teaches resilience, I guess. Alexander's expression softened noticeably. Resilience is something I deeply respect. Perhaps it's why I felt you were the right choice. Their conversation gradually deepened, shifting unexpectedly toward personal truths neither had anticipated sharing. Alexander spoke quietly about his strained relationship with his father, whose coldness and obsession with power had shaped his entire life. Emma listened carefully, compassion filling her eyes as she absorbed his quiet pain. My father believed emotions were weakness, Alexander said bitterly. He valued control above everything, even family. Emma nodded slowly, understanding perfectly the raw ache of abandonment. I know that feeling. I know that feeling. After my mom died, my father simply walked away. It leaves scars, makes trusting anyone feel impossible. They stared at each other silently, the shared pain between them forging a fragile connection. Neither had anticipated. For the first time, Alexander didn't appear distant or detached, but vulnerable, his carefully constructed walls momentarily crumbling. Emma realized with quiet astonishment that beneath his cold exterior existed a wounded man, just as lost and lonely as she was. Their eyes held for a lingering moment, unspoken understanding, bridging the gap between their worlds. It was a fragile beginning, a tentative acknowledgement of shared suffering, and perhaps, Emma thought cautiously, the first steps toward something deeper and more powerful than either had bargained for. Weeks turned into months, and as Emma adjusted to the surreal luxury of Alexander's mansion, she felt the first gentle flutters of life within her. The pregnancy stirred complicated feelings. Excitement mingled uneasily with uncertainty and an unexpected tenderness. These emotions both comforted and frightened her, reminding her daily that what had begun as a mere transaction was quickly becoming something far deeper. Yet beneath her tentative happiness lay a lingering anxiety, a fear Emma couldn't quite shake, that the past she'd tried so desperately to bury might suddenly resurface, threatening the fragile peace she'd found. And indeed, trouble soon appeared in the formidable shape of Victoria Bennet, Alexander's fiercely protective older sister. Victoria arrived unannounced one bright afternoon, sweeping into the mansion with polished confidence and an aura of unmistakable authority. Emma, who had been quietly sketching in the garden, heard sharp footsteps approaching and glanced up to find herself under the scrutiny of a woman whose icy gaze radiated suspicion. "And you must be Emma," Victoria said coolly, her eyes tracing Emma's figure with undisguised disdain. "The mysterious woman carrying my brother's child." Emma's pulse quickened, but she steadied her voice. "I am," she responded simply, refusing to shrink beneath Victoria's piercing stare. Victoria tilted her head slightly, a humorless smile touching her lips. "You know, Alexander might believe your innocent act, but I'm not convinced. I protect my family fiercely, Emma, and I'll discover exactly what you're hiding." Emma's throat tightened, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm not hiding anything," she insisted, fighting the tremble in her voice. "This arrangement was Alexander's idea, not mine." Victoria's smile widened bitterly. "We'll see about that." Over the next few days, Emma felt Victoria's eyes on her constantly, watching her every move, measuring each word she spoke. The tension grew steadily, thickening the atmosphere within the mansion until Emma could barely breathe beneath its weight. Victoria was relentless, determined to expose the truth she believed Emma concealed. Then, one morning, Victoria burst into Alexander's study, slamming a thick folder onto his polished desk. her expression triumphant yet cold. Alexander frowned sharply, irritated by his sister's intrusion. "What's this, Victoria?" he asked tightly. "Proof," she said sharply. "Proof that your precious Emma is not as innocent as she seems. She has a criminal record, Alexander, shoplifting charges from when she was 17. She's been homeless, expelled from art school for missing classes." Did she conveniently forget to mention all that? Alexander's jaw tightened as he opened the folder, his gaze scanning the documents quickly. Anger flared in his eyes, though Victoria couldn't immediately tell toward whom it was directed. "What do you expect this to prove?" Alexander demanded, coldly. Victoria leaned forward, her voice low and firm. "That she's a fraud, Alexander. She's not here because she cares about you or this baby. She's using you, manipulating your kindness and your wealth. Open your eyes before it's too late." Alexander's expression hardened further, his voice dangerously quiet. "Leave, Victoria. I'll handle this." Victoria glared silently but stormed from the room, slamming the door behind her. Alone, Alexander stood staring down at the file, conflicting emotions warring within him. Anger, disappointment, and a surprising wave of sadness. Later that evening, Alexander found Emma quietly sketching in the art studio. She looked up, smiling softly until she saw the grave seriousness etched into his face. Her smile faded instantly, replaced by fear. "What's wrong, Alexander?" He held up the folder, his voice strained. "Why didn't you tell me, Emma? About your past, your criminal record?" Emma's heart sank, panic clawing at her chest. She stood abruptly, shaking slightly. "I was going to tell you," she admitted painfully, eyes glistening with tears. "But I was terrified you'd judge me, that you'd think less of me, that you'd see me as worthless, just like everyone else. Just like everyone else." Alexander stepped closer, his voice softer now, eyes searching hers intently. "Tell me what happened." Emma took a deep, shuddering breath, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I was 17. My mother had just died, my father abandoned me, and I had nowhere to turn. I stole a few things, food, clothes, just to survive. It was wrong, I know, but I was desperate. That record, it's haunted me ever since." Her voice broke, shame coloring her cheeks. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to see me as broken, Alexander. I wanted you to believe in the person I am now, not the mistakes I've made." Alexander reached out slowly, gently lifting her chin so their eyes met again. His expression had softened entirely, compassion overtaking his initial anger. "Emma, your past doesn't define who you are today. Everyone makes mistakes, especially when pushed to extremes. What matters most to me is the woman standing before me, the strong, resilient woman who's endured unimaginable hardship and still found the courage to trust." Emma's tears fell freely now, relief flooding her heart. Alexander gently wiped her tears away, voice quiet yet firm. "But no more secrets," he whispered. "Promise me." Emma nodded shakily, feeling a powerful connection forged between them, built not merely on the contract they'd signed, but something far stronger and deeper. Trust. As weeks passed, Emma felt the weight of her growing attachment to Alexander deepening, becoming impossible to deny. The quiet conversations, gentle glances, and unexpected kindness he showed had begun to crack the careful boundaries they'd set between them. Her heart raced whenever she heard his footsteps approaching. Warmth spread through her chest at the sound of his deep voice. It terrified her, this growing tenderness, because falling in love with Alexander wasn't supposed to be part of their arrangement. Meanwhile, Victoria's determination to sabotage Emma had only grown stronger, fueling an atmosphere of subtle hostility. Unable to persuade Alexander directly, Victoria decided to involve someone from his past, Jessica, his elegant, ambitious ex-wife. Jessica arrived at the mansion one crisp afternoon, radiant and poised, her confidence filling every corner of the home as if she'd never truly left. Emma first encountered Jessica when she heard her voice echoing through the grand foyer. Curious yet apprehensive, she stepped from the art studio and froze, confronted by the sight of Jessica embracing Alexander warmly, a gleaming smile lighting her flawless features. "Alexander," Jessica purred sweetly, her eyes sparkling with carefully practiced charm, "I've missed you." Alexander stiffened slightly, returning her embrace politely yet with unmistakable restraint. "Jessica," he acknowledged coolly. "What brings you here?" Jessica pulled back slightly, her smile never faltering. "I've been reflecting on our past. Perhaps we gave up too easily. Perhaps we deserve another chance." Emma's heart plummeted, jealousy rising fiercely within her chest, leaving her breathless. Jessica was everything Emma was not: beautiful, sophisticated, undeniably polished. Emma felt suddenly inadequate, keenly aware of her worn jeans, messy hair, and smudged fingertips stained by paint. At that moment, Victoria appeared, shooting Emma a triumphant glance before greeting Jessica warmly. "Jessica, how wonderful you're here. Alexander certainly needs someone like you back in his life." "Especially now." Jessica raised an elegant brow, her gaze shifting sharply to Emma, eyes filled with disdainful curiosity. "And who is this?" she asked softly, a cold undertone evident beneath her charming facade. Emma straightened her posture, lifting her chin defiantly. "Emma Carter," she replied clearly. "I'm—" "The surrogate," Victoria interrupted dismissively. "Temporary, of course. Just until the child is born." Jessica's lips curled into a cold smile, her eyes glittering with amusement. "How very—" Emma felt her cheeks flush, embarrassment warring with anger. She quickly excused herself, retreating to the sanctuary of her studio. But the damage was done. Jessica had planted a seed of doubt within Emma's heart, stirring insecurity she couldn't shake. Over the following days, Jessica made herself increasingly present, skillfully maneuvering her way back into Alexander's daily life. Each conversation between them dripped with nostalgia, every subtle touch designed to remind him of the intimacy they'd once shared. Emma struggled to maintain her composure, avoiding Alexander whenever possible, afraid that he would see the hurt and jealousy etched plainly upon her face. Jessica finally confronted Emma directly one afternoon in the garden, approaching her with measured confidence. "Emma," she began coolly, her voice dripping condescension, "I suppose I should thank you for your service. But let's be clear, Alexander needs a real partner. Someone who truly understands him." Emma clenched her fists tightly, refusing to let Jessica see the pain she caused. "We'll see," she replied calmly, though her voice trembled slightly. Jessica laughed softly, elegantly cruel. "Trust me, once the child is born, you'll be nothing more than a distant memory. Alexander deserves more than some charity case he took pity on." That night, Emma sat alone in her room, overwhelmed by sorrow and doubt. The love she'd quietly nurtured now felt like a heavy burden, an impossible dream. Jessica's presence had shaken her deeply, making her question her place in Alexander's life and heart. Tears spilled silently down her cheeks as she whispered to herself a truth she desperately tried to deny. "I'm in love with him." Later that evening, Alexander found Emma in the art studio, staring blankly at an unfinished painting. He approached quietly, concern softening his features. "Emma," he said gently, sensing her sadness, "are you all right?" She hesitated, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Jessica, Alexander sighed deeply, stepping closer. Jessica loves the idea of who she wanted me to become, not who I really am. Our relationship failed because she couldn't accept the man I am. Emma turned slowly, vulnerability clear in her eyes. Maybe she's right, though. Maybe you deserve someone better. He shook his head firmly, stepping even closer, his gaze intent. Emma, you see the real me. Flaws, mistakes, and all. You've changed something deep within me, something I thought was broken forever. Jessica could never understand me the way you do. Emma's heart surged painfully, hope battling with lingering fear. Alexander. He reached out, gently cupping her cheek, silencing her doubts. Don't ever question your worth, Emma. You're exactly where you belong. Standing together in the quiet studio, the space between them diminished, emotions charged and unspoken truths finally acknowledged. At that moment, Emma knew her feelings were reciprocated, and she also knew their love would soon be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Jessica's presence in the mansion cast an oppressive shadow, deepening Emma's insecurities and intensifying her fears. Though Alexander had reassured her, Emma still struggled, unable to escape the sense of inadequacy Jessica had skillfully planted. The fragile bond Emma and Alexander had begun to build now felt threatened, strained by whispered conversations and lingering doubts. Meanwhile, Victoria continued her quiet but relentless campaign, determined to push Emma from Alexander's life permanently. One evening, Alexander was away on business, leaving Emma vulnerable and exposed to Victoria's carefully orchestrated manipulations. Seizing the opportunity, Jessica and Victoria cornered Emma in the drawing room, their faces glowing with thinly veiled hostility. You're out of your depth, Emma, Jessica purred sweetly, her voice dripping venom beneath its silky charm. Do you really think Alexander could ever love someone like you? You're a convenient arrangement, nothing more. Emma clenched her jaw tightly, fighting the painful sting of those words. You don't know anything about what Alexander feels, she shot back defiantly, though doubt twisted sharply within her chest. Victoria stepped forward smoothly, holding up a thick folder filled with documents. We know enough, she sneered, eyes glittering triumphantly. There's plenty more we've uncovered about your past. Alexander deserves to know the full truth. How manipulative, desperate, and untrustworthy you really are. Emma's heart pounded painfully as Victoria tossed the folder onto the coffee table, photographs and documents scattering like fallen leaves. Among them were harsh reminders of Emma's struggles, records of unpaid bills, her expulsion from art school, images of her rough days living homeless. Shame flooded through her, overwhelming her attempts at strength. Jessica leaned closer, voice lowering to a cruel whisper. Do yourself a favor and leave quietly. Alexander belongs with someone who truly knows him, someone worthy of his legacy, not a damaged, broken girl who brings nothing but trouble. Tears blurred Emma's vision, humiliation burning hot on her cheeks. Unable to bear the assault any longer, she fled the room, racing upstairs to her bedroom, where she collapsed onto the bed, heart aching with sorrow and self-doubt. Later that night, Alexander returned home to find Emma sitting alone, shoulders slumped, eyes red from crying. His heart tightened painfully at the sight of her distress. Emma, what's happened? He demanded softly, stepping closer with concern. She couldn't meet his gaze, her voice trembling. Jessica and Victoria showed me things from my past, things that prove how broken I am. They're right, Alexander. I'm not good enough for you. Alexander reached out, gently taking her trembling hands into his. Emma, listen to me, he said firmly, voice edged with quiet determination. They don't see the woman I see. They don't understand your strength or your courage. But they're right, she whispered painfully, voice thick with tears. Maybe I am just trouble. His expression darkened, frustration and anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. I'll handle Jessica and Victoria. But please don't ever doubt yourself or your place here again. You're not a burden. You're someone who's changed my life completely. He wiped away her tears gently, determination blazing fiercely in his eyes. But Emma's heart still trembled with uncertainty, haunted by echoes of Jessica's poisonous words. The following morning, Alexander confronted Jessica and Victoria with icy calmness. Standing in the library, he faced them both, expression hard and unwavering. You've crossed a line, he stated firmly, voice coldly authoritative. Emma is here because I want her here. You have no right to interfere. Jessica's composure slipped, shock rippling across her polished features. Alexander, she's deceiving you. Enough, he interrupted sharply, eyes flashing with barely contained anger. You made your choices when you left me, Jessica. And Victoria, you've gone too far. Emma's past is not your weapon. If you can't respect my decisions, you're both no longer welcome here. Stunned into silence, Victoria glared bitterly at Alexander, realization dawning sharply. Jessica, equally shocked by his vehemence, turned away angrily, storming out without another word. Later, Alexander found Emma sitting quietly in the garden, gazing blankly at the horizon. He sat beside her gently, taking her hand carefully in his own. It's over, he whispered softly. They won't hurt you again. Emma exhaled shakily, turning to face him. Alexander, why do you trust me so much? How can you still believe in me? He met her gaze steadily, warmth softening his features. Because I see you, Emma. Not your past, not your mistakes. Just you. You've given me something I thought was impossible. Hope. Emma's heart surged painfully, tears filling her eyes again. This time from relief, gratitude, and something far deeper. Alexander's unwavering trust had broken down the last barrier within her, washing away doubts and insecurities that had haunted her for too long. Thank you, she whispered, voice trembling with emotion, for believing in me even when I couldn't. Alexander gently lifted her chin, eyes serious yet tender. I'll always believe in you, Emma. We'll face whatever comes next together. And in that quiet moment, beneath the gentle warmth of sunlight, Emma finally allowed herself to believe fully that perhaps she truly deserved happiness, and that her heart, wounded as it was, had finally found a safe place to rest. Just as Emma began to trust in the happiness she'd found, her world shattered once more. Victoria, humiliated and angered by Alexander's fierce defense of Emma, refused to accept defeat. Driven by desperation and resentment, she took her schemes a step further, crossing a line she couldn't take back. One evening, as Emma sat quietly sketching by the garden windows, she sensed movement behind her, but before she could react, strong hands grabbed her roughly from behind, silencing her scream with a cold, firm palm. Emma struggled violently, panic surging through her veins as she was forced into a waiting vehicle. Her heart thundered, terror choking off her breath. Blindfolded and trembling, Emma was driven to an unfamiliar, isolated place, where she found herself alone, trapped in a dimly lit room. Fear consumed her thoughts, her mind spinning desperately. Who had taken her, and why? Back at the mansion, Alexander paced restlessly, feeling an uneasy sensation deep within. Something wasn't right. As night fell and Emma didn't appear for dinner, anxiety began gnawing at him fiercely. He searched the house frantically, calling her name, heart sinking with every unanswered cry. Panic soon replaced caution, and Alexander wasted no time contacting authorities, his voice tight with fear. Hours passed agonizingly slow, until finally, through surveillance footage, Alexander discovered the truth. Emma had been taken. The recordings revealed Victoria's involvement clearly, exposing her shocking betrayal. Rage burned through Alexander's veins, mixed with profound guilt and a crushing sense of helplessness. He mobilized every resource he had, determined to find Emma, whatever the cost. Meanwhile, locked inside her lonely prison, Emma clutched protectively at her swollen belly, whispering softly to the life within her, determined to shield her babies from the overwhelming fear she felt. Hours dragged into a sleepless blur of dread and uncertainty, until the sound of footsteps echoed sharply through the empty hallway. Emma's breath caught painfully, her heart pounding fiercely against her ribs, but the door opened not to her captor, but to Alexander. His eyes wild with relief and anguish, he rushed forward, wrapping his strong arms protectively around her shaking body. Emma buried her face against his chest, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're safe now," Alexander whispered fiercely, holding her tightly. "I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. I won't fail you again." Emma clung desperately to him, feeling the powerful beat of his heart, reassured by the strength of his embrace. At that moment, she realized just how much he meant to her, the depth of her love crystallizing painfully clear, the depth of her love crystallizing painfully clear. Yet, the intensity of her emotions was abruptly interrupted as sharp pain tore suddenly through her abdomen, leaving her gasping in shock. "Alexander," she breathed, panic widening her eyes. "Something's wrong." His expression filled instantly with fear, and within moments, he had rushed her into the waiting car, speeding toward the hospital. Throughout the tense journey, Alexander never released her hand, murmuring reassurances, eyes dark with worry and fierce protectiveness. At the hospital, medical personnel swiftly took control, guiding Emma into the delivery room. Pain overwhelmed her senses. Yet Alexander refused to leave her side, gripping her hand tightly through each agonizing contraction. Hours blurred into chaos and cries of encouragement until, at last, the first strong cry of a newborn shattered the tension, filled silence. "It's a boy," announced the doctor warmly, holding up the tiny, squirming child. Before Emma or Alexander could fully absorb the overwhelming joy of the moment, another cry soon filled the room. "And a beautiful girl," the doctor smiled gently, placing both precious babies carefully into Emma's waiting arms. Exhausted yet euphoric, Emma gazed tearfully at their perfect faces, feeling love swell fiercely within her chest, so deep and powerful it nearly took her breath away. Beside her, Alexander stood motionless, utterly captivated by their children. For the first time, his carefully guarded expression broke entirely, revealing raw emotion he'd kept hidden beneath years of stoic detachment. "They're incredible," he whispered, voice thick with awe and wonder. Carefully, he reached out, touching his son's tiny fingers, then gently stroking his daughter's soft cheek. Emma lifted her gaze to his, their eyes locking, the connection between them intensifying profoundly. "Alexander," she murmured softly, tears shimmering gently in her eyes. "These babies are ours, not just your heirs, not part of any agreement. They're our family." He leaned in, pressing his forehead gently against hers, voice trembling with emotion. "I never imagined it could feel like this," he whispered fiercely. "Emma, everything has changed. My life means nothing without you. I want us, our family, to be together, not because of obligation, but because I love you." Emma's breath caught painfully, her heart swelling with overwhelming joy. "I love you too, Alexander, more deeply than I ever thought possible." At that moment, amid tears and whispers of promises, the painful past and uncertainties they'd faced melted away, replaced by boundless hope for the future. Together, holding their newborn twins, they understood clearly. They were no longer bound merely by contracts or deals, but by genuine, undeniable love. A love forged in adversity, tested through hardship, and now stronger and more profound than either had ever imagined possible. Returning home from the hospital, Emma felt an indescribable warmth spread through her heart as she stepped back into the mansion, now transformed from a place of lonely grandeur into a sanctuary filled with love and newfound purpose. The twins brought life and joy into every corner of the home, their soft cries and gentle coos replacing the silence that had once echoed painfully throughout its rooms. Alexander, once so detached and coldly reserved, embraced fatherhood with surprising tenderness. Each day, Emma watched in quiet amazement as he cradled their children, soothed them gently when they cried, and murmured softly to them, his voice filled with a depth of affection she'd never imagined possible. It was a side of him that both startled and captivated her, drawing them even closer together. Yet beneath the happiness lay lingering shadows, painful reminders of Victoria's betrayal and the fears they had overcome. Alexander struggled inwardly, haunted by guilt for having allowed Emma's safety to be compromised, while Emma grappled silently with insecurities, questioning if she truly deserved this new life they were building. Both recognized the scars left by past wounds, but neither voiced their doubts aloud, each unwilling to risk disturbing the fragile peace they'd achieved. One evening, after settling the twins into their cribs, Alexander found Emma standing alone on the balcony, gazing pensively at the starlit sky. Approaching quietly, he gently wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "Tell me what's bothering you," he whispered softly, sensing her troubled heart. Emma sighed deeply, leaning into his comforting warmth. "It still feels unreal, Alexander. All of this. I never thought happiness could be mine, and now that it is, part of me worries it'll slip away." Alexander's arms tightened protectively, his voice low and steady. "It won't, Emma. I promise you. I'll never let anything hurt you again." She turned slowly in his embrace, looking into his eyes earnestly. "But what about Victoria? Do you regret confronting her, pushing her away because of me?" His expression hardened briefly, pain flickering in his eyes. "Victoria made her choice, Emma. I had to protect you and our children. You're my family now, and that means more to me than anything. No regrets." Emma's heart swelled, yet uncertainty lingered stubbornly. "Alexander, sometimes I wonder if I belong in your world. If someone like me, with my past and my mistakes, could ever truly be worthy of you." He gently cupped her face, forcing her to meet his steady, unwavering gaze. "Emma, your past shaped the incredible woman you've become. I'm the one who feels unworthy, because you've shown me love, kindness, and strength I never believed existed. You're exactly where you belong. Bye." Tears shimmered softly in her eyes as he leaned in, kissing her tenderly beneath the stars, his lips erasing her lingering doubts. At that moment, Emma finally allowed herself to fully trust the reality of their shared happiness. Days turned into weeks, and slowly their lives settled into a rhythm filled with laughter, tender moments, and genuine love. Alexander found himself spending less time consumed by business, choosing instead to remain home, savoring simple joys like holding his children, watching Emma paint, or sharing quiet evenings by the fire. Then, unexpectedly one afternoon, Victoria arrived again, this time unannounced, standing hesitantly at the front entrance, her demeanor humble and eyes downcast. Alexander immediately tensed, wary, instinctively stepping protectively in front of Emma and their children. "What do you want, Victoria?" Alexander's voice held a sharp edge, eyes wary. Victoria hesitated, her voice trembling with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Alexander, please, let me speak. I was wrong, horribly wrong. I allowed my fear and pride to blind me, and I nearly destroyed everything that matters most to you. I'm here because I regret it deeply and want to make amends." Alexander studied her cautiously, torn between lingering anger and a flicker of hope. Emma stepped forward gently, touching his arm reassuringly. "Alexander, perhaps she deserves a chance. Forgiveness can heal many wounds." Alexander exhaled slowly, visibly conflicted, before finally nodding reluctantly. "You hurt us deeply, Victoria. But Emma's right. We can't move forward holding on to anger." Victoria's expression softened into genuine relief, gratitude filling her eyes. "I promise, Alexander. I'll spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of your forgiveness. Thank you." From that day forward, Victoria became a quiet but sincere presence in their lives, slowly rebuilding trust. She formed a tentative bond with Emma, helping care for the twins, gradually earning Alexander's forgiveness through genuine effort and humility. Weeks later, one evening, Alexander invited Emma into the garden, softly illuminated beneath the gentle glow of the moon. Taking her hand, he gazed deeply into her eyes. "This started as a contract, Emma, an arrangement without love or emotion," he murmured softly, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing the carefully folded document they'd signed months before. Holding it up, he smiled faintly, eyes warm with affection. "But it doesn't hold meaning anymore. I want something more real than any agreement could ever offer." Before Emma's astonished eyes, Alexander tore the contract in two, allowing the pieces to flutter gently to the ground. Kneeling before her, he pulled out a small velvet box, opening it slowly to reveal a delicate ring glittering softly in the moonlight. "Emma Carter, will you marry me?" "Not because of obligation or arrangement, but because I love you more deeply than I ever imagined possible." Emma's heart soared with joy, tears streaming softly down her cheeks as she nodded fiercely. "Yes, Alexander, 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close beneath the starlit sky, their love, once fragile, tentative, born of circumstance, was sealed with a profound promise, a future built not upon necessity or obligation, but on trust, forgiveness, and an enduring love stronger than anything either of them had ever known. The mansion garden had never looked as enchanting as it did the morning of Alexander and Emma's wedding. Sunlight filtered softly through the trees, casting gentle golden rays onto rows of white chairs adorned with pale ribbons and flowers. Close friends and family members had gathered quietly, their faces glowing with warmth and anticipation, yet Emma saw none of them clearly. All she could see was Alexander standing at the end of the aisle, waiting patiently for her, his dark eyes locked lovingly onto hers, his steady presence radiating unwavering strength and reassurance. Emma's heartbeat quickened with every careful step she took toward him, each moment bringing her closer to the future she once never dared to dream possible. She wore a simple, yet elegant, white gown, delicate lace tracing her shoulders, the fabric gently trailing behind her. In her hands she clutched a small bouquet of soft pink roses, the fragrance surrounding her like a comforting embrace. Alexander stood tall and proud, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, yet the softness in his gaze as he watched her approach revealed a tenderness he no longer hid. Their twins, now a few months old, cooed softly from their place beside the aisle, nestled comfortably in Victoria's careful embrace. Emma glanced briefly toward them, smiling with heartfelt gratitude at Victoria's gentle nod. The bond they had begun to forge felt genuine, a healing process built slowly through sincerity and mutual respect. Victoria's transformation had touched Emma deeply, proving that even the deepest wounds could mend with patience and forgiveness. When Emma finally reached Alexander's side, he took her hand gently, his touch strong and reassuring. He leaned in slightly, whispering quietly enough for only her to hear, "You're breathtaking, Emma. I'm the luckiest man alive." Her heart swelled with love as tears blurred her vision, and together they turned toward the officiant, ready to seal their promises before those who loved them most. Alexander spoke first, his voice clear yet filled with quiet emotion. "Emma, before I met you, I believed life was measured by power, wealth, and control. You showed me the emptiness of those beliefs. You taught me what matters most: love, compassion, and trust. You've given me a family, a sense of purpose, and more happiness than I ever thought possible. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and love you with every part of my being, for as long as we both live." Emma's tears flowed freely now, her voice trembling gently as she responded. "Alexander, you found me when I had lost faith in myself and the world. You gave me hope, safety, and unconditional trust. Through your love, I found strength I never knew existed. With you, I discovered a sense of belonging and peace that I thought was forever out of reach. I promise to stand by your side, support you through every challenge, and love you endlessly with all of my heart." Their vows spoken, they exchanged rings, symbols of their unbreakable bond, shining gently in the sunlight. As Alexander slid the ring onto Emma's finger, he paused briefly, his eyes meeting hers with profound sincerity. "Forever," he whispered softly, his voice filled with quiet reverence. "Forever," Emma echoed gently, slipping the ring onto his finger, feeling her heart overflow with love. As they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, cheers and applause erupted warmly around them. Emma felt her soul soar, the beauty of the moment wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. The twins laughed and giggled, seemingly understanding the joy surrounding their small family. The celebration continued into the afternoon, laughter and warmth filling the mansion grounds. Victoria approached Emma quietly, sincerity softening her normally guarded expression. "Thank you for forgiving me, Emma," she said gently. "You've brought more than happiness to Alexander. You've shown me what true compassion looks like." Emma smiled warmly, embracing Victoria softly. "We all deserve second chances," she murmured, eyes glistening softly. "I'm glad we found ours together." That night, as stars glittered gently overhead, Emma and Alexander stood quietly on the balcony, gazing into the serene darkness. Alexander wrapped his arm around her waist, drawing her close. "Can you believe how far we've come?" he asked softly, awe and gratitude mingling gently in his voice. Emma rested her head upon his shoulder, breathing deeply, savoring the comfort of his embrace. "Sometimes it feels unreal," she admitted softly. "But then I look at you, our children, everything we've built together, and I know it's exactly where I belong." He kissed her softly, holding her even tighter. "I spent my whole life chasing success, only to find true happiness in the quiet moments with you. You've given me something money could never buy: a family, genuine love, and endless hope." Emma smiled, her heart soaring with joy. "And you've given me strength, courage, and a home, a place where I'm finally safe to love and be loved in return." Together beneath the quiet stars, they stood silently, hearts entwined, knowing that the future stretching gently ahead was filled not merely with promise or possibility, but the certainty of love, a love that had blossomed from hardship and struggle, yet had grown into something profoundly beautiful, resilient, and utterly unbreakable. Life settled into a gentle, beautiful rhythm after their wedding, one filled with quiet mornings spent sharing coffee by the kitchen window, afternoons chasing laughter, filled toddlers around sunlit gardens, and evenings wrapped in each other's arms beneath star-filled skies. The mansion, once cold and echoing with loneliness, had transformed into a true home, vibrant with warmth, love, and newfound joy. Emma's art career blossomed brightly alongside motherhood. With Alexander's unwavering encouragement, she displayed her paintings in renowned galleries, her talent finally receiving the recognition she'd once only dreamed of. On opening nights, Alexander stood proudly by her side, his eyes filled with quiet admiration and genuine pride. Emma's heart swelled each time she caught him gazing at her from across a crowded room, silently communicating a depth of love and respect that transcended mere words. Alexander himself had changed profoundly. The ruthless businessman who had once viewed life solely as transactional had evolved into a devoted father and loving husband, discovering true fulfillment in simple, everyday moments. His once consuming obsession with control and legacy had faded, replaced by a deep, genuine appreciation for family, love, and happiness. He now found his greatest achievements not in boardroom victories or financial triumphs, but in teaching his children to walk, sharing bedtime stories, and comforting them gently through nightmares. Victoria remained a steadfast, supportive presence, now a loving aunt to the twins. She often helped care for them, her bond with Emma deepening as trust and affection replaced the bitterness and suspicion of the past. Through patience, forgiveness, and shared experiences, a strong family unity had emerged, proving that even broken relationships could heal with sincerity and compassion. One quiet evening, after the twins were fast asleep, Alexander and Emma sat comfortably on the patio, the soft glow of lanterns illuminating their tranquil surroundings. Alexander reached for Emma's hand, holding it tenderly as he gazed thoughtfully into the twilight. "Emma," he began softly, his voice gentle yet sincere, "do you ever wonder what life would have been like if we hadn't crossed paths?" Emma smiled faintly, squeezing his hand gently. "Sometimes," she admitted softly, "but when I do, I realize everything I've endured, the hardships, heartbreak, even the loneliness, led me directly to you, and I wouldn't trade our journey for anything." He exhaled slowly, emotion tightening his chest. "I spent my life searching for meaning in power, success, and control. But you taught me to find meaning in trust, love, and the joy of family. Without you, I'd still be empty, endlessly searching for something I didn't even know existed." Emma's eyes softened warmly. "Alexander, you gave me safety, love, and a home when I had nothing. You saw strength in me I couldn't see myself. Because of you, I believe in happiness again." He leaned closer, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Together, we've built something I never imagined possible. A life founded on true partnership and unconditional love. I promise to spend every day honoring what we have, protecting it fiercely, and never taking a single moment for granted." Emma nestled closer to him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "And I promise to always cherish the family we've created, to love you deeply, and to appreciate the peace we've found." Together, beneath the quiet evening sky, surrounded by the gentle fragrance of blooming flowers, they knew their future stretched brightly ahead, secure in the knowledge that love, once born from desperate circumstances, had grown into something powerful, resilient, and utterly unbreakable. Months turned into years, and their twins grew into joyful children, their laughter echoing through the halls of the home their parents had carefully built with love. Alexander and Emma faced each new challenge with confidence and unity, their bond growing stronger with every passing moment. Emma continued to inspire Alexander with her kindness, resilience, and creativity, while he supported and encouraged her dreams wholeheartedly. One evening, as Emma tucked their children into bed, Alexander watched quietly from the doorway, his heart full. When she joined him moments later, he took her hand gently, guiding her back toward the balcony where so many of their important conversations had occurred. "I never imagined happiness like this," he confessed softly, holding her gaze tenderly. "I never imagined I could feel so complete." Emma smiled warmly, gently cupping his face. "Happiness found us, Alexander. Despite everything that stood against us, we found each other, and we built something beautiful." He nodded slowly, emotion shimmering in his eyes. "Together, we faced our fears, overcame the past, and created a life richer and more meaningful than any I ever imagined. You've taught me how to truly live, Emma, how to love deeply and completely." She brushed her lips softly against his, her voice barely a whisper. "And you've shown me that true strength comes from vulnerability, from trusting completely and loving fearlessly." As they stood wrapped together beneath the gentle stars, their hearts beating in perfect harmony, both Emma and Alexander knew they had created more than just a family or a life. They had built an unshakable foundation of trust, resilience, and genuine, abiding love. Through their journey, filled with struggle and triumph, pain and healing, they had discovered that true happiness was not found in wealth or power, but in the quiet moments shared between two souls brave enough to open their hearts fully and forever. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about the true meaning of happiness and success. Often, society convinces us that wealth, status, or power are the paths to fulfillment. Yet Alexander and Emma's journey reveals something far deeper. Genuine happiness and true fulfillment come only when we open our hearts fully, embracing love, compassion, and vulnerability. Alexander spent years chasing power and control, believing success was measured by material gains. However, he discovered that despite his achievements, true happiness eluded him until he allowed love to enter his life. Emma, who had experienced immense hardship and abandonment, found strength and hope through trust and forgiveness, proving that resilience can transform pain into beauty. Their love story reminds us that our past doesn't define our future. It's our willingness to trust, forgive, and move forward that shapes the life we build. Another powerful message is the importance of second chances, whether it's forgiving someone who hurt us deeply or allowing ourselves to heal from past mistakes. Second chances can mend broken bonds and open doors to new beginnings. Alexander and Emma's ability to forgive Victoria, despite her actions, highlights the transformative power of compassion. Ultimately, this story affirms that authentic happiness lies in genuine human connection, built on trust, love, and mutual respect, not money, power, or superficial accomplishments. It encourages us to prioritize relationships, embrace vulnerability, and cherish the quiet moments of life. Only then can we truly discover the joy and peace that make life meaningful. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss out on inspiring stories like this one. See you next time.